Hello, Niall.
Afternoon.
I can see your beautiful face there, Niall, as well. So how are you, sir? If you wouldn't mind, obviously, just dropping off the camera just for a minute or so, that'd be fabulous. Excellent.
Great.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is the third of our events that we're hosting at Northern Ireland Science Festival. Absolutely delighted that you're with us again today. Some of you are hopefully returning for the first time. Or coming back, obviously, and some of you are probably attending for the first time. Just to give you a bit of context, the Science Festival came to us a month or two ago, said Matrix would love to do work with you guys. And the ambition and aim of all three interconnected events is to talk about the growth of the tech sector, but also the growth of obviously the need for STEM subjects to be kind of pushed through schools, to discuss obviously perhaps if there could be issues with bias in the sector, bias in AI, and now on to our third event, which is looking to see and talk around the growth of entrepreneurship in the tech sector in Northern Ireland. And now how we can now furthermore drive an inclusive ecosystem to help it go even further. So there's loads of fantastic things that are happening in Northern Ireland at the moment in terms of that ecosystem, both from a foreign direct investment level and also from indigenous tech companies that are setting up, or maybe even coming over from the rest of the UK or Ireland and basing themselves in Northern Ireland. So it's a good time. It's a great time to be having this conversation, but I think like everyone, we'd always like to think we can do even better. And that's what the ambition is today, is to explore some of the ways that we can maybe grow and explore how we can become more diverse in the type of people that start tech businesses as well. So I've got a fantastic panel with me today. Hello, Rachel. If you just drop your camera off for a minute or so, that'd be fabulous. So just to run through the agenda, if that's okay for today, I'm doing the graveyard shift, which means basically as we wait for attendees to join, you'll see me for a couple of minutes, and then forgive me, I will only be here to ask questions, and then that's it. I just wanted to say, while we're waiting for everyone to join in, a massive congratulations to Elemental Software, Leanne and Jennifer, and Bodybase, Joseph and Martin, who are two companies in Northern Ireland that have been selected for the Tech Nation early stage. Well, they're not early stage, but high growth potential startup competition. I think there was around about 350 entrants this year. There's two Northern Irish companies out of a top 10 of 10. So that's a fifth of the winners have come from Northern Ireland. So it's a fantastic achievement from Elemental and Bodybase. Also, a big shout out to Gary Davidson from Tech Nation, who does an absolutely stellar job of promoting the Northern Ireland tech scene here. Wish Gary could be with us today as well to kind of celebrate that. And I obviously appreciate we only heard about Rising Stars a couple of hours ago. All I would say is Naomi Timpley, who's the keynote speaker, who's just dropped in their brilliant news. Naomi met with the Elemental team, well, Leanne, last year, about the same time, just before lockdown and COVID really hit. And she was a speaker at an event I was running up in Derry. And Leanne spoke and shared her story to really early stage female founders. And it's really important that we amplify a diverse panel of entrepreneurs that exists in Northern Ireland, whether that's obviously male, female, sexual orientation, race. We need to make sure that we amplify success that comes from all corners of what is a beautiful place to live. So I'm absolutely delighted that Leanne and Jennifer have won. Leanne's got an inspirational story, obviously coming from the community sector, setting up a business, obviously a software platform that supports doctors, obviously into social prescribing solutions, and they've scaled across the UK. So massive congratulations, and also to Bodybase, of course, and Gary as well, obviously getting two in the top 10. Right, that is my graveyard shift, because now we have around half of the attendees in with us, so I'm delighted to kind of move on. I just wanted to give a shout out to Matrix, who have supported the three events. They're an industry leading panel with the primary aim of championing the role of science and technology in Northern Ireland. Do a fantastic job, and they're doing some great work at the moment about exploring obviously women in tech and also STEM. Glandor, massive shout out to Niall and the team there. They've come in and they've sponsored this event specifically. They provide flexible workspace in Belfast, Dublin, Cork. Fantastic location. The one thing I would say about Niall is and the Glandor team is they're always willing to support events like this and support the ecosystem, whether that's at an earlier stage startup all the way to a scaling an FDI company. So Niall Glandor, thank you ever so much. You'll hear a little bit more from Niall later on in the show as well. So I'm going to introduce you to Naomi Timpley. I am not a technologist, that is what I would say, but I do know how to do slide share. So hopefully Naomi, if she is using any slides, can do. If you don't have any slides, Naomi, don't panic, because I know you can talk forever anyway. So Naomi, if you want to turn your camera on, I want to get Naomi to talk a little bit about what she's doing in Manchester, because it'd be lovely to learn about something we may be able to adopt here as well in some form. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you, Alistair. I will take your comments about me talking the hind leg off donkey as a compliment. So yeah, I'm not going to share any slides with you. I'm just going to talk about a program that I've been working on in Greater Manchester. But just firstly to introduce myself, I am Naomi Timpley. I'm a growth and innovation consultant. I sit on a number of boards, and I also co-founded something called Tech North Advocates, which is a private sector-led advocacy that champions tech in the North, but part of a global movement, which is Global Tech Advocates. And we do have a Belfast Tech Advocates as well. I've known Alistair for a number of years and have taken part in the wonderful digital DNA, which I was absolutely gutted that we obviously didn't have it in its normal form last year, but hopefully that will change next year. And I've been working with on entrepreneurship programs for a number of years. I recently was asked by Infor Group, who operate the landing in Media City, to develop a program specifically for women. The program is called Freelancer 100. It's a program for female founders and freelancers from the tech, digital and creative media sectors. It's a fully funded program, which is a combination of, oh, lovely to see you, Tan, too. I've just seen that in the chat. It's a combination of workshops, peer mentoring, and we also have a community platform. And it was actually an idea on a piece of paper at the beginning of November. I was approached to develop a program. And we launched it for applications at the end of November after about 10 days of working on it. And we have a group of the most wonderful women from all over Greater Manchester and a few from Lancashire and Cheshire who started the programme the first week of February. So it's a 12-week programme. Its community is at the very, very heart of it. And it's in a response to women being affected really greatly by the pandemic, myself included in that. I actually had a job last year, but my very first job in 18 years. I've been working for myself for a long time, and I was persuaded to take a role. As soon as the pandemic hit, that role went. So I had to sort of start again, really. And, you know, also women have taken a lot of caring responsibilities and homeschooling. So the programme was really created with that in mind. And also just the fact that so many women were, you know, that had been made redundant, were looking to go and start their own businesses. So the programme is very much, you know, 8 years experience from myself of running programs very similar, the good, the bad and the ugly, and really making sure that we're giving these women the tools to be able to start and run businesses. You know, that's the very first session that we had was on confidence and being brave, because it is a very brave thing to run your own business, as I'm sure any of you who do that will know. And then I think probably the most really insightful thing has been the camaraderie of the whole programme. And again, going back to my point about it being very much community led, is that we are having 95% attendance. You know, as with any sort of fully funded program, attendance is really key when you've got funding attached to something, and also participation. So we've got a number of different platforms to support the program. We use something called Notion, which is almost like that's where the schedule, and there's a library of content on there which has continuously been updated. We have a platform that we use called My2B, which is a community platform where everyone has a profile on there, and the women can set goals on there and wins from the program. And also it's the collaborative space that's outside of the social network. As much as I love LinkedIn and Twitter and the various other platforms, I really wanted to make sure that we had a safe space for people outside of a network, and that community platform will be there 9 months after the program. The really exciting news is that actually the program's going so well. We are now working on a roadmap to work with 1,000 women over the next 2 years. So watch this space, Belfast. I think the whole sort of premise of why Alistair has asked me to speak today is really about making sure, and I think Alistair does such a brilliant job of this, and also huge credit to Simon Bailey as well, is making sure that that Belfast and Northern Ireland is part of the bigger picture. You've obviously got some amazing communities in Belfast. I certainly have been most welcomed when I've been to Digital DNA, and also the fabulous event that I went to last year in Derry. It's really making sure that you are part of the conversation. You're part of the whole sort of skills agenda, and making sure that you get the right talent. And I think, for me, what I've seen just over the last 3 years, and this has been with the support of sort of Alistair and Simon, is just to see that the amazing ideas and businesses that are coming out of Belfast. I was just overjoyed to see that we had 2 winners from Northern Ireland as part of a national program that Tech Nation has. Really, really amazing. And also, I think another thing, again, sorry, Alistair, I'm being your fangirl here, but with the work that yourself, Simon, and also Mary McKenna do, it is, the ecosystem. It's very important that you are part of and engaging with other ecosystems, not only nationally but internationally and worldwide. I think Jenny's just put a comment here, looking forward to hearing ideas on building better ecosystems and further afield. I think my piece of advice is just making sure that you are aware of what is going on outside of your own doorstep, but also making sure that you're part of conversations. Just to give you an example, I had a wonderful conversation with a guy called Phil Benson, who runs UK Black Tech, who are doing a lot of work to make sure that ethnic minorities are involved in innovation. And going back to the Freelance Her program that we've developed, one of the things, I turned it around very, very quickly, but what was really, really important to me is having a good understanding of what the needs of the women that we were targeting to, but also making sure that we got applications from all of the 10 boroughs of Greater Manchester, from all different diversity groups. And, I'm really glad to say that actually we have that. We have, diverse neurodiversity. We have women with disabilities. We have ethnic diversity, LGBTQ, and it's making sure that when you are creating programs or you're being part of an ecosystem, that it's an inclusive ecosystem. If it's not inclusive, this is something that you should be looking at. I sit on a number of boards. I'm very engaged with one of my local universities, the University of Salford Business School. I'm chair of their industry advisory board, and the industry advisory board is very much about making sure that industry has on a level of academic, making sure that the curriculum is industry focused, but also making sure that the students have opportunities and that they're employable. So it's brilliant to hear that you know, universities of the two universities that have in Belfast are very much part of your ecosystems. I know certainly over where I am, I'm based in Greater Manchester. We've got 4 universities here. I always encourage businesses, whether you are, you know, a founder, a freelancer, whatever type of business you have, to engage with your local university. I know that that's not always difficult because sometimes universities don't have an obvious front door, but I would say my first port of call would be entrepreneurship societies and also entrepreneurship educators. If you are looking at the business schools as well, business schools offer an amazing programs, not only to students but to SMEs, and also you have the opportunity to have support to innovate as well, especially with the KTP. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say, Alistair. Happy to answer any questions, and as always, my door is always open. But just really fantastic, again, just to sort of see all the wonderful things that are happening. And for me, I try not to get emotional now because I always do, but you know, I've been welcomed into the bosom of Belfast, and you know, I think certainly big shout out to everybody that has made me feel incredibly welcome, and that is your USP as well, is that you do fantastic events like Digital DNA and other events, and you know, big credit to you, because I know how difficult it is to pull off events like that. So thank you.
Good stuff, Naomi. Thank you for your time today. I'm going to ask you one quick question that I've been wanting to ask. Obviously, I looked at the application process for Freelancer 100, and it was quite clear that you were in that very much open to and asking those from the LGBT community, and obviously those that come and wanting an ethnically diverse cohort as well, which I think is just wonderful to read. However, I want to know more about, obviously, by doing that, did you just naturally get the applications, or did you have to build those bridges, and what did you do?
Okay, so a couple of things we did, and this is really key, is the market validation had been done previous to this, and it has also been based on the experience that I have. A couple of things that I did is I was involved with not only the program development, but also the branding and the marketing. So making sure that our messaging was correct, making sure that actually, if we are appealing to a diverse group of people, that actually that was reflective in our marketing. I did buyer personas. I did 4 buyer personas, and you know, we completely, the whole team nailed it when it came to the applications, because you know, age diversity, neurodiversity, ethnic diversity. We have people on the program from the early 20s to the 60s. We have women who are tech founders. We've got women that are, you know, do service-based businesses. We've got people at very early embryonic stage that are still working in their other jobs, and this is a side hustle that they want to develop. But it was very much about our messaging. And I think that's key. You know, I'll give an example, and I'm not going to say about the name of the organization, but a number of years ago, I had an organisation that had approached me and asked me why they weren't getting people apply to their programs. And I said, well, the first thing you're going to do is have a look at your website, have a look at what you're sharing on social. Is that reflective? Because if all you're seeing are white middle-class men, that's what you're going to get. And it's the same with anything. So it's all to do with the messaging, and also giving people a voice. Another thing that we've done, and again, you know, this has all been I'm lucky because I have this sort of full circle of skills. And I would say, and I do have this book actually, I didn't write it, it's called The Generalist, but it's very good. Me and Alistair are generalists, but the great thing is that it gives you a really, especially if you've got a marketing head on as well, it gives you the skills to be able to say, do you know what, if we want things to be inclusive, we need to use a certain language, we need to use certain messaging, you know, we need to use certain images, we need to use certain videos. And also we are very much about telling the stories of these women. And the most wonderful thing again has been to see the sort of social media proof to say, do you know what, we're doing this right because people are saying that we're doing it right.
Good. It's a good point.
Does that answer your question?
It answers your question. And obviously going back to UK Black Tech, which we've done some work with in terms of Starticers, not directly as in paid work, but more community work in promoting obviously what they do. But one of the best initiatives I saw they did was probably about 3 years ago now, and they created stock footage of Black professionals, because if you go on Google and you search for Black professionals, it is very difficult to find stock images. If you go on to Pexels or Pixel Bay or whatever they're called, all of those free stock images sites, some of the images are very derogatory.
Do you know where I got my images from? The best place to get royalty-free images is from unsplash.com. And do you know what, they have a really broad range of images, but also real images. What I didn't want sort of women in businessy suits, because I knew that the people that are applying for it weren't going to be like that. I wanted women that were mothers. I wanted you know, women with Asian faces, Black faces, and again, this is really very much about, and this is you know, I am a real stickler when I see, especially, you know, events where you see the usual suspects and you don't see different faces. It's so important in this day. And also we've got children that are looking up, and I'm sure, you know, Carol's runs the amazing programs with Young Enterprise. Again, that's really, really important, is that you don't get people applying for things if things are not marketed to them correctly. And another really key thing, and you have mentioned it, is socio-economic, is making sure that actually that you're getting people from all different parts of the community as well.
Absolutely. I'm going to give a shout out here to Adam Flanagan. And if it's the same Adam that I think it is, Adam was, if it is, forgive me, Adam, if it's not, but when Adam was about 16 or 17, I think he put on a festival in Belfast, if it's the same gentleman. And the reason he did that is because he was tired of going to meetups where he was probably the youngest person in the room by about 15 years. So if it is you, Adam, congratulations, because you did an amazing job there. What he did flag up in his comment was that basically Octopus Ventures recently reported Queen's as the top university for spin-outs. In fact, they were the most entrepreneurial across obviously their departments and teams across the UK, which was just a fantastic achievement. The flip of that, however, and we'll end on this, is there was a scheme, or there was an initiative that the UK government set up about 5 years ago called Startup Britain. Naomi will remember this as well. And it had this bus, and it used to drive around all the universities in the UK, and then at the end of the year they would say, we empowered 30,000 more entrepreneurs in the UK to start businesses. And it was bullshit. Sorry for my language.
No, it was bullshit. I remember the bloody bus.
Yeah. Now imagine it's a bit like someone goes to church, they're pretty much religious when they step in that door. It's a little bit like Startup Bus going to entrepreneurial societies in the UK. The students in those places are already entrepreneurial. What we need to do as entrepreneurial thinkers, program managers and doers is get out to the communities where it isn't as engaged. Naomi, just a final point on that.
Yeah, just one final point. So I also do a number of things with like local schools in the area. But I think you can bring entrepreneurial thinking into anything and everything. And this is around, especially within the curriculum. Unfortunately, most schools and teachers have so much enormous pressure around qualifications, but actually it's that entrepreneurial thinking, and it's about problem solving. They're really key skills, because I was part of a fantastic program in Greater Manchester called Go Digital, which is about upskilling and getting young people to think about digital skills. And when you sort of talk about the sort of tech digital industry, most people assume it's always about coding. It's not. We need people that are creative. Creativity is the very heart of innovation. We need people that are good at bringing teams together. We need people that can communicate. It's not just about coding, it's about everything.
Yeah, 100%, Naomi. I'm going to end on that, because otherwise me and you would be talking into 11
I know.
And obviously everyone would be saying, what's going on? We should have a podcast, really. That's what it should be, Naomi.
Yeah, we should totally have a podcast.
Totally. But listen, thank you ever so much. There's been some lovely comments that have come in. Vanity metrics cap mentions. Obviously, I agree with that point very much. So Simon said that's a very valid point. Carol said completely agree with entrepreneurial thinking. I think there's just some really fantastic things going on in Northern Ireland. It's not to dismiss all the good stuff that's happening. It's just saying we've got an opportunity now, especially with a pandemic, which it's been, where there's going to be higher levels of unemployment, to really make a difference to people that otherwise potentially won't have jobs. Can we try and help them create their own? And that's what Naomi is doing in Manchester. I think we should be doing similar things here, and we are. But let's continue to see what else we can do. Naomi, thank you for your time today. If you can stay, you can stay.
I'm going to stay until 2:45 because I'm loving it so far. But thank you for everyone listening. I'll turn my camera off now.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we're moving on. And another reason why we do this, and I have to say, obviously, before I go any further, Naomi associated with me with digital DNA. And as much as I do work with digital DNA, Simon Bailey is the champion there. So, and he does a great job, as Naomi mentioned. I just jump in every now and again and help with the startup pitching competition and run those type of things. But Simon, fair play to all you do. As of, I could mention 50 other people in Northern Ireland that do a wonderful job building the ecosystem here. So moving on, I think these type of events, we like Naomi mentioned, it's always a little bit about the same faces. Hopefully today you'll see a few new ones. I'm going to introduce you now, and Rachel, you can turn your camera on to a very early stage founder, Rachel Coulter. Rachel came to me and she's on our Impacting Founders Female Founder program that we're running, which is for early stage female founders in Northern Ireland. I'll give you an example of Rachel. She came to me about 3 weeks ago and said, can I do my elevator pitch and can you listen and give me some feedback? And after about, well, it was a minute, I said, that's probably one of the best elevator pitches I've heard from an early stage founder. Let's amplify what you're doing and just let's give you the opportunity to share what you're doing without giving too much away. She's a great, fantastic early stage female founder in Northern Ireland. It reminds me a little bit of Elemental Software, Rachel. I listened to them pitch at Digital DNA. I think it was in 2016. Now they're a rising star, one of the top 10 in the UK. So set your ambitions at that level. You can do really well for yourself as well. So Rachel, I'm going to let you share a couple of slides. I'll turn my camera off, and obviously thanks for joining us today.
Brilliant, thank you very much. No pressure now. Can everybody see that okay? Yeah, I think so. So thanks for having me all today, and I'll just take you through a little bit behind the scenes of what we're working on at Stable Manager. This is Totalis. He was bought for 15 million euros. And today, somebody gave him the wrong feed.
Rachel, just to check, I can only see a black screen, so I just want to double check.
Oh dear. Okay. It's screen sharing on me. Let's see.
Okay, if someone just drop in the comments, just to double check that we can see it. Black screen here too. Okay, cool.
Oh dear.
Rachel, if we'll try it one more time. If not, we'll just talk, and you'll just tell us what you're up to, and it'll be
okay.
As well.
Let's see. I'll try doing cool. It's a bit more complicated, but let's see. Give it a go.
Okay, it's a long black screen now.
Yeah. Are we getting there now?
This is exactly the same as if we were at a live event in St George's Market or in the Millennium Forum in Derry. It's not going to make any difference. So if you want to turn that off, I'm going to just chat with you about what you're up to for a few minutes.
That's all right.
Happy days. Good stuff. Right, let me turn my camera back on. So, Rachel, do your presentation as if you were, but without the slides. And if I need to interject at any point and ask you a question, I will.
Sure, no problem. So we can picture that there's a lovely horse on screen, and this is where I'm going. So in horses, if a horse received the wrong feed or didn't receive the supplements that it needed, this can cause gastrointestinal issues, colic, and even lead to death. At Stable Manager, we are eradicating this problem. As an award-winning software engineer and a Grand Prix dressage rider, I built Stable Manager for any yard of any size anywhere in the world. And it's part of an equestrian market valued at $300 million. We already have global early adopters, including Jess Knowles-Thomas, a specialised riding coach from the USA. We're not only saving stable yards, upwards of £25,000 per year, we are saving horses' lives. Stable Manager is not just a part of the future of the equestrian industry. We are creating that future. So I've been involved in horses for over 15 years now, and I compete at Grand Prix level dressage. This is the highest level of dressage, and I'm one of 2 riders in Northern Ireland competing at this level. Along the way, I've won 2 silver and 1 bronze medal for Ireland at the youth home international level, and I was the first rider in history from Northern Ireland to win the Pony Club Open Dressage Championships. I've also worked in multiple yards, from local riding schools all the way up to international dressage yards with horses worth millions. I'm also a software engineer specialising in the fields of artificial intelligence, data science, and app development. I've worked in various roles from startups to global data companies, and I've also won multiple hackathons. Most recently, the Woman Who Code Hack for Her hackathon, just before COVID hit, where my friend Karen and I developed Find My Mentor, a platform for women to find a mentor from some of the top tech companies in the world. Which leads me nicely into my biggest learning from building Stable Manager so far. Arguably the most crucial stumbling block for most startups here in Northern Ireland is a lack of mentorship. I've been there. When you start a business, especially at a young age, it can be incredibly difficult to ask for the help you need. Maybe you don't want to feel stupid, or maybe you're worried that you'll be found out and that people will lose respect for you when they realize you don't know everything. When in reality, some of the most successful entrepreneurs, and even people in general, ask for help daily. I had a lovely quote from Barack Obama on screen, so we can picture that, but he basically said how he asked for help every single day. And I know, being in that position, I would have gone, like, as a young startup founder, I would have gone, well, that's nice, but he's Barack Obama and I'm terrified. But his wife, Michelle Obama, actually was asked by Oprah Winfrey, how do you get over feeling intimidated sitting at big tables filled with smart, powerful men? Michelle's response, you realize pretty quickly a lot of them aren't that smart. It's a little tongue in cheek, but it's true. Those achieving more than you will never mock you for asking for help to level up. The hate or negativity that people can face typically comes from those who aren't making those risks. And so that leads me into support available in Northern Ireland. I just wanted to flag some of the key things that have really helped me along the way. Over the past 6 months, I've pitched for and secured funding for Stable Manager from Invest Northern Ireland, Future Screens Northern Ireland, and TechStart. I also secured one of 20 spaces from over 800 applicants for the Propel Pre-Accelerator ran by Ignite Northern Ireland, which offers not only financial support, but an incredible network of industry-leading mentors. Impacting Founders, a programme ran by Alistair and Lee Heron, has given me access to training and guidance from women across the globe who are excelling in their own spheres. I've also completed 2 Women in Business programmes to date, and through all these programmes, I've not only learned so much about business, but made friends for life. Through Impacting Founders, I discovered the Institute of Directors Pitch Perfect competition, for which I'm a finalist. The results will be announced at the Global Conference on the 12th of March, so keep your fingers crossed for me that my PowerPoint works. And that's it for me. Applications are currently open for the Early Access Programme for Stable Manager. So if you're an equine service provider, such as a coach, a physio, a farrier, or a horse owner, or know someone who is, please do get in touch. The website is www.stablemanager.tech, and all of my socials are either Stable Manager, or for me personally, it's just at Rachel Coulter. I'm lucky to have a unique spelling, so that's me pretty much everywhere. So thank you.
Rachel, Rachel, as fabulous as always. And I'm going to give you an example. Say that went horribly wrong, which it possibly could have. You could have stumbled on what you were saying. It reminds me a little bit, again, thinking of someone that pitched on stage, a lady called Amy Williams. And her presentation didn't just go wrong. She had remembered it word for word. And about halfway through, she forgot her lines and basically pretty much walked off stage. That company is now worth about 5 million. She did that pitch about 2.5 years ago. Presentations go wrong, but businesses go right if you keep working hard. And Rachel, you're a great example of someone that's going to do really well for themselves in Northern Ireland. And you've got exactly the right attitude to ask for help and ignore maybe the naysayer, which you're going to come up against. There's always going to be people like that. So Rachel, congratulations for what you're doing so far. Rachel, please stay with us for the rest of the time here as well. I remember it was in the scene in the chats a second ago as well. Kevin said, obviously, that, and this is something you picked up on, Rachel. Kevin said that in terms of, obviously, some of the students he worked with said that you could never start a business because they don't go to a grammar school. That's the type of leadership we need to get rid of in Northern Ireland if we're going to ever achieve as a society. It should be that anyone can start a business in Northern Ireland. It's not always financial. It can be for passion. Rachel, you're not looking for investment. That's one thing. You're going to bootstrap your way to success, and then at some point you might need it down the line when you're really mega famous.
That's the plan, yeah.
That's the plan. And it's not a bad way to go. And I'm going to give a shout out to Ignite at this point. Ignite do a fabulous job. Not just in Belfast, but the whole of Northern Ireland, to try and engage, obviously, with early stage founders. Propel and the main accelerator program are brilliant examples of a program that can run in Northern Ireland really successfully. So Rachel, I'd like to think you'll be on the next stage of that process with Ignite at some point in the future as well. So if you want to drop your camera off, but thank you, Rachel, for your time. If we were in a real place, there'd be lots of a round of applause. So thank you, Rachel. Adam said, well done, Rachel. Ignore the naysayers, like the pun there. If I was that clever, life would be beautiful. Happy days. So I'm going to move on to the panel now. And if everyone that's joining us on the panel wants to jump in, that would be fantastic. So turn your cameras on. Thank you ever so much for joining us today, everybody. Okay, so on my top left-hand corner, we have Carol Fitzsimmons, who's from Young Enterprise, MBE, I believe. We have underneath Carol is another MBE, and Jane Brady. Elizabeth, who is an early stage female founder. In fact, obviously, I wouldn't say early stage anymore because they're just doing absolutely fantastic. Niall, who is from Glandor, which is a co-working space based in Belfast, service offices. They look after FDI companies all the way down to like early stage founders. And I'd like to introduce you to Kwaku as well. And forgive me, is that the right pronunciation for your first name?
So it's Kwaku.
Kwaku. Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Forgive me, I can't even say my own name right sometimes, so hopefully that's okay. What I would say is, Kwaku, we have you with us today from London. You're not just your own founder in that you have a food-based startup, but you're a program manager for YSYS, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Excellent, good stuff. And obviously, again, the reason obviously for involving and inviting yourself and Naomi along is that we need to learn better from elsewhere. And obviously, I think Founders Door is a great example of the program that's been run that is doing a wonderful job. So we'll find out a little bit more about that as we go along as well. So first up, Jane, do you want to introduce yourself? And then I want to ask you the first question.
Yes, my name is Jane Brady. I'm a Digital Innovation Commissioner in Belfast, recently took up the role with Belfast City Council. But the rest of my career up to that point has been in the private sector. So I was a partner in a venture capital fund, working with early stage technology companies for 7 years, and then in big industry. And I co-founded an AI startup about 1.5 years ago as well.
Excellent, mega busy. Jane, let's start with the first thing. Let's start with the very positives. Can you give me a positive stat, some feedback or thought about the growth of the tech sector in Northern Ireland as a whole, maybe the last 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who's active on Twitter cannot have failed to see the kind of all the growing evidence pools of what a strong position Northern Ireland is and Belfast is. I mean, that one of those really compelling stats is the Entrepreneurial Impact Report by Octopus for Queen's University. So that showed that for the 2nd year in a row, that Queen's delivered the best impact in terms of entrepreneurs. That means the money invested delivered the highest return. So when we get the money, we give the best impact. Number 2 in both those years was Cambridge University as well. So not only that, but this is the best place to actually live in the UK as a digital tech person. 25% of our jobs posted in 2019 were in digital. We're up to about 86% of recruitment, even in COVID times. Many of our digital companies have recruited and grown during the pandemic. And actually, if you look towards working in that sector, it's the best salary to cost of living index as well. So this is the best kind of location to work and be in that sector. You look at FDI as well, and then you look at the brilliant and burgeoning companies that we have. I've worked, with It's Elemental. It's just a fantastic company showing kind of what that grassroots knowledge of the problem space and that entrepreneurial impact has given. So we have a really strong base in order to deliver something really quite transformative. But inclusion has to be at the heart of it, and tackling diversity, because actually we can't make this work in any meaningful way if we don't involve kind of strategies which bring those in place.
Absolutely, Jane. And you make the point of mentioning Elemental again. And one thing that struck me about Elemental is they started with a £500 gift that was given to them when they pitched to competition. And the founder that won it was a gentleman who said, "I don't need the money, but Leanne, I believe that you're going to do something with Jennifer, which is going to change the way that we look at social prescribing." And that little bit of money, that little bit of support from someone is why potentially they are where they are now. So that's self-belief. So it's fantastic you mentioned them. Leanne is obviously someone from the community sector as well, as is Jennifer, and it's great to see their growth. It's also what Naomi mentioned as well. You don't need to be a techie to be in the tech sector. That's a really cool message to pass on. Niall, I'm going to come to yourself. Obviously, with the spaces you have, I'm going to guess, obviously, this hasn't been the easiest of 12 months, but what I would probably say is we still keep seeing loads of growth, as in FDI companies coming into Belfast specifically at the moment. I could probably name about 5 American insurance companies that seem to have landed in the last 3-4 months.
No, definitely, and there's been great success from an FDI perspective in the last few years. But I guess the seeds were sown well before, back in the 90s, and with Allstate coming in, Liberty IT, to name a few companies, Seagate. So back in the 90s, when we kind of came away from the troubles, a lot of the overseas guys in Invest had a hard story to tell because there wasn't an existing base there. But those guys really set the groundwork for a lot of the really good projects and initiatives that are coming into Northern Ireland now. So I think there's great testimony to Invest in I to try and get some initial testimonials and some initial American companies to come in. And now we're seeing, I suppose, Northern Ireland. There's so many reports out there that put Northern Ireland up on various different rankings that are really high level. And back in the day when I was at Invest in I, you used to get one report and you kind of think, well, this is great. We've got something that we can really take out there. But now there's actually so many that, FDI intelligence about locations for cybersecurity, for fintech. It's really, really positive. And I think, at the moment, even though there has been, I guess, a lot of challenges over the last year, one thing that we found is, and that's where Invest in I's FDI proposition has been pretty resilient, and that a lot of the projects that we've been going after as a region have been resilient to the whole pandemic in terms of the cyber firms that are obviously busier than ever at the moment. So I think, from an Invest in I perspective, that has been a great story, and of course that's kind of fed into the ecosystem as well. It's from a Landor perspective, you said we house companies from that very early stage in terms of some of our co-working, our startup scale, and then the FDI as well. And what we want to be able to try and do as a region is to collaborate well and to encourage those connections and facilitate the larger enterprise with the small companies. And that's, I think, is a very positive story for Northern Ireland at the moment.
Excellent. It reminds me a little bit about Dublin. and the amount of international US companies that kind of developed there. But the real success of those American companies, and I'm sure obviously this is the same in any big city, is that it created spin-offs of staff internally who would work for those big companies, then starting the next big thing. And let's hope obviously those big FDIs that come in from elsewhere then create, in a way, the next indigenous companies, because those staff will upskill and then move on elsewhere. Carol, I want to come to yourself. I just want to find out a little bit more, obviously, about the disparity of male-female in Northern Ireland still. I'd love to kind of understand where we're at the moment, maybe compared to maybe 5, 6, 10 years ago, whatever. Niall mentioned the 90s. I was a little kid then, so I can't really tell you much about that. Okay, Carol, your audio's off.
Sorry, I had to mute because the 7-year-old daughter tried to creep in, of course, just as I was ready to go on. Thank you, and great to be here. I suppose, I mean, we can pick up on a lot of the themes that have come through there, but certainly I was around the 90s, so I can talk to some of that. We've seen substantial growth, certainly, of the tech sector, but it still is very much seen as that male role modeling. And you can see a lot of those organizations, when you look at their recruitment campaigns, are very much trying to push against that. But, you know, I looked with interest at the SIA A-level statistics for computers in 2018, and as recently as that, 314 males took the A-level in computing and 50 females. And I think when you look at that disparity, when you're starting with that at A-level, it's undoubtable that then we are going to have a huge gap there. So being able to deal with building up a much stronger pipeline of females who have those computer qualifications is really important. But it's also actually about that whole STEM agenda. We've worked really hard to talk about the importance of STEM. And then something that I've seen in Young Enterprise on the flip side is that then people that don't study STEM subjects, those non-STEM people that we talk about, then do not see themselves as able to go into the sector. So they don't apply and they deselect themselves. So I think, you know, Naomi touched on that earlier, but understanding that people who are non-tech people can go into the industry and there are a vast range of roles for them, and they can also upskill when they're in it, could really help to build up, I think, female participation in that workforce. Also as well, I mean, there's so many issues, but we've seen there from Rachel, one of the reasons we were involved in Impacting Founders is about having those female role models that can go in front of the young people that we work with at school and that can almost advocate for them. I mean, we know that we want to encourage, Rachel mentioned, by having an awareness of the IOD event, you know, you can then push yourself forward for it. So how we build communities around those that maybe don't have that voice for themselves or the confidence for themselves, and find them pathways through and support them and advocate for them and on their behalf, I think is really important for us to do.
100%. Just on that note, the IOD, 4 of the 6 female finalists are Impacting Founders, female founders. And that was just because we told them the opportunity was there. And that is what it's about, is joining the dots. It's not rocket science. It's just making sure that people know about opportunities when it comes down to it. You mentioned obviously stats at A-level. Scarlett Jeffers, who was one of the panelists yesterday, mentioned when she was at school, she had to make a special case to the school that she was at in Northern Ireland to study physics at A-level, because it was assumed that as a girl, she wouldn't be able to go and study that at university. And we're not talking decades ago. It's quite embarrassing to hear that. And obviously from an educational perspective, that's something we surely need to look at. Elizabeth, I'm going to move over to yourself, obviously with a fantastic, obviously, background, doctorate. Could you tell us a little bit more about material evolution and perhaps obviously your experience of being in Northern Ireland and then growing a business, which is really exciting, I have to say.
Yeah, so my experience was, I wasn't actually started out as an architect. So mine wasn't in science, but I decided to do a science PhD because who doesn't? So material evolution is making sustainable concrete from waste. We use AI and machine learning to allow us to make concrete from 95% waste. we save 85% on CO2 emissions, and we create a more durable and fire-resistant product. So for me, I didn't really know that the entrepreneur thing was a thing until I was in it. I think that was my biggest thing. Like, it was only when you start going to a few of like the meetups and you're like, oh, I could do this. Why aren't I doing this? And for me, like, it was a very slow process to get into, and a really kind of path where you just meet people, and then you meet people and you're like, oh, why aren't we doing this? Why am I not doing this? Why not me, kind of thing. So for me, that was really great. And the support in Northern Ireland is unreal for it. Like, there's so many people that you can talk to. Everyone is so open. And for me, after finishing the PhD, it didn't make sense to stay in academia, because the opportunity to make that big change was there. Like, I was in Propel last year, so that was amazing. That gave me that boost, that the way to learn the language, because I think there's a big language problem when you go into the startup field. There's all these acronyms for everything, which always blow my mind. And I think, like, learning how to speak as someone who wants to make a difference, who wants to make that idea come to life. And Northern Ireland just has so much support, and so many people are so passionate about how they can change and help other people make changes.
So since Propel, where have you gone with the business? I'm assuming obviously there is some kind of people that go, you can't revolutionize concrete. Is that something you've come up as a barrier?
Oh, of course, yes. No, there's the people who say that you can't do it. I'm usually the only woman in the room when we talk about concrete. It's just how it happens. But yeah, there's a lot of people that don't think you can do that. But I think data, the way we look at things, is how we'll change the world. But we've just had such great support as well. Like, the people, for every naysayer, there's another 10 people who are willing to give us time to help us get to the next stage. Since kind of then, we were on Techstars in Indiana. So we went to America during the pandemic to kind of get over there. We're looking to set up production facilities now in the UK and in America. So there's 2 options at the moment that we're playing with. It's kind of just blowing up. There's just so
amazing.
many opportunities.
Well, what I would say is, obviously, before I forget to mention this, Wincanton have got a program at the moment, obviously, to work with tech companies. One of the areas is certainly the construction sector and sustainability. I'll send you a link because it'd be a great introduction for you to have. And that's, again, joining the dots. That's a London program, but the way the world is at the moment, it's virtual. So I'm absolutely delighted, obviously, that we have one of the program manager for Founders Door with us here, which is YSYS. Forgive me again for the pronunciation, but Kwaku, what's the meaning behind YSYS as a starting point?
Sure. Firstly, thank you for having me, Alistair. YSY stands for Your Startup, Your Story. And initially, it was actually started off as a WhatsApp group, funnily enough. And it's always interesting hearing the story about it. Obviously, I joined the company maybe, a couple of years after its inception. But Deborah, who's our founder, she was working within the tech space, and she was kind of, realizing and having experiences that, as a woman and as a Black woman in particular, she found quite difficult. And the reason behind kind of starting that WhatsApp group and creating that network was to be able to support and kind of create a sense of community with other people from diverse backgrounds. So Your Story kind of grew from there, and it ended up kind of capturing people from so many different backgrounds within the ecosystem. So, we have the founders, we have people working in careers in tech, but then we also have program managers, we have, people that are more on the creative side. And yeah, essentially we try to capture all of them and bring them together so that we can leverage each other's skills and expertise to push each other forward.
Excellent. And then and Founders Door specifically here, it's a tech program. Am I right in thinking? And obviously tell us a little bit more about some of the successes from that as well.
Sure. So yeah, Founders Door is kind of like the program that I took on when I initially joined. So it was part of the Digital Talent Program, which was kind of an initiative from the London Mayor. And we run that with support from Capital Enterprise as part of the kind of One Tech consortium. And The real kind of mission behind it was, how can we, in London, as the world becomes more kind of digital focused and more kind of like business focused, the economy being very much focused around how digital innovation can increase, how can we kind of equip people with the tools and the knowledge to kind of be on the forefront of that movement. And particularly, we saw that there's certain communities that are kind of left back from the kind of startup space, particularly within tech. And what we wanted to do with Founders Door is ensure that as many people from underrepresented groups, whether that's kind of BAME background, whether it's women, you know, and particularly within like a younger audience as well, first-time founders, that they have access to these opportunities as well and have the structure and the framework to create their own startups. So Founders Door was the initiative that we started off. It was initially a 6-week program, you know, kind of made up of workshops, mentorship, kind of community onboarding. There was office space that was provided through a partnership with WeWork. And really the focus was, how do we get somebody, a young person that has an idea, doesn't really know the first steps to take, and get them to a stage where they can at least validate that idea and kind of get to a stage where they can then develop an MVP. So that's what the focus was. We've ran the program we've had 4 cohorts since we launched in 2018. Had about 50 founders go through the program. Had some, you know, various successes with teams that have gone on to raise crowdfunding campaigns, join other more established accelerator programs as well, build MVPs, get to pre-launch stage, hire their first team members, etc. So, you know, had loads of success early on, and I think as time goes on, we're just going to see more and more success as they are members of a community, and we continue to support them. And that's something that was really like important to us, is, okay, there's a 6-week program, but it doesn't just end there. You're part of a community now where we can continuously, you know, connect you with the right people, or to get you involved in opportunities that can push you further.
Elizabeth mentioned as well, obviously it's the tone of language sometimes, isn't it? Obviously it's an understanding of obviously what, I mean, I 7 years ago I worked in recruitment, forgive me everybody, and I loved it actually, to be fair, and I've got some really good recruitment friends, but one thing I would say is I hadn't got a Scooby-Doo about anything to do with tech startups. The terminology, I don't still, but things like software as a service, you know, like terminology that you have to pick up on as you go along. I'm assuming obviously in itself that that's a barrier to entry for a lot of people unless they are techie. And I just wanted to kind of find out from your learnings so far of one of these programs, has there been anything that you've maybe previously wrongly assumed, or have been really impressed with since you've launched, once you've reviewed the programs, something that you could maybe pass on to us here? Because I really think that we do an amazing job in Northern Ireland, but we definitely need to both reach out to founders, obviously from ethnically diverse backgrounds better. We need to embrace the LGBTQ community better into tech. And we certainly need to look at social economic background and see how we can obviously help young kids from poor backgrounds be taken out of poverty. So is there anything that you've learned or you feel like you could pass on that?
Sure, yeah. I guess there's something from each of those touch points, because, you know, there's a lot of different groups that we try to target. So as you mentioned, whether it's based on ethnicity, whether it's on socioeconomic status, whether it's on gender, and each of those needs a different approach. YS is in quite a privileged position in the sense that we are already embedded in the communities that we serve. So we were community first before we started running programs. So it's easy for us relatively to reach out to, you know, the types of people, the types of audience that we're trying to support. When it comes to, I think, the design of programs, having those demographics in mind and the particular, let's say, issues that they may face, having that in mind in the actual designs of the programs is really important. So for instance, we had, particularly with early stage founders, first time founders, like you said, there are things around terminology that can be a little bit of a barrier. So ensuring that we can provide information, whether it's through a kind of glossary of technical startup terms, whether it's having a workshop where it kind of breaks down and demystifies these things, because a lot of them, the concepts are things that someone can understand if it's used in layman terms, but then you have these technical language which can kind of throw people off and make them feel like maybe they're not smart enough to understand it. But then when you have the right people teaching it, it makes a lot more sense. So another thing we did as well is actually hire workshop leaders from our community. So I think one thing we found is that if the teachers and your mentors, etc., kind of reflect your background as well, there's a sense of comfort that allows you to connect more with the teachers and to feel more comfortable asking questions and kind of getting the most out of it. Similarly, when we think about socioeconomic status, I think you have to have in mind and have in order budgets that can help support. So one thing that we did was have a budget aside for kind of travel expenses. We had a budget for, particularly for our female founders, some of who were kind of young parents, had a budget for childcare. We ensured that the program itself actually ran on Saturdays, primarily because we realized that a lot of the founders that are going to take part in our programs have to work full time. A lot of accelerator programs that exist, they kind of require you to work on your startup full time, and they may have the privilege of having a lot of savings that they can use to kind of live off of, but the majority of people that take part in our types of programs don't have that. So making it as accessible as possible from those standpoints as well was super important.
I think you've just mentioned some really interesting points, and certainly the one thing I saw Carol's eyes pick up, obviously, when you mentioned budget for childcare or budget for travel expenses, they seem, now that you mention them, pretty much common sense, but I don't know whether some programs that exist in Northern Ireland would do that. Thank you ever so much for passing on that wisdom as well and your experience. We will come back to it. I think, again, I could probably chat with you all day about this, and I'm going to ask Jane to kind of, obviously with your experience, Jane, obviously as the Belfast Digital Innovation Commissioner, how well do you think we're doing going into like communities in Northern Ireland and starting things from there? Or is it external stuff and then we wonder why maybe some of our applicants are not always as diverse as we'd like them to be?
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. Actually, great reflections from the panel. I guess the reason I took up the job, to be quite honest, was that I saw within Belfast City Council, I could develop that reach in terms of inclusion because there is that community linkage, and bring that entrepreneurial and venture capital-based background to provide the platforms. So my experience over the last 9 months is actually the grassroots linkages is really strong, and the opportunities are there. We just talked about the whole compelling opportunity for Northern Ireland in terms of technology and innovation, but the piece that we need to make it work, there isn't enough entrepreneurs and there isn't enough skills in that resource. So we need to tackle the diversity and inclusion perspective from actually an economic element. And what Belfast City Council is doing with our partners, and I'm very involved with the Department for the Economy as well, is putting strategies in place to do that. So I guess one of the first projects and programs I've been involved in with Belfast and our Region City Deal partners and FE colleges, and it was funded by Department for the Economy, was actually Digital Future. So looking at those under 25s who don't have any digital skills, coming out in the middle of last year into the pandemic with no jobs and new roles, but we know we need those digital skills. So developing a 6-month program to both reskill them for 3 months and then to put them into those work placements. And they're currently in those placements at the moment. So again, making sure that those digital skills were built in that capacity. But all the programs that we're now delivering in terms of the city deal, I'm chair of the digital pillar, which is a 120 million program. We put a 55 million challenge fund in that. And the dimensions that we're going to evaluate those challenge funds are both in delivering economic impact, but also delivering societal impact. So we need to make sure that the benefits that we're delivering now tackle those big programs and projects. And as Kwaki mentioned, you need to put funding interventions there to do that. And you need to design it in inclusion, not bolted on at the end. So we're developing with our partners an inclusive innovation strategy that we can actually co-design the solutions in, rather than second guess those groups and say this is what those partners need. So it's going in to be measured as actually the KPIs we need for these programs need to deliver actually an inclusive innovation piece. And that's a very long scale program over the next number of years. But one of the first pieces that we're doing to kind of trial that, and it was just announced yesterday, is a Hub In project, which has been delivered with just under 8 million funding from Horizon 2020. It's 8 cities across the world. Belfast City Council is leading in one in the Maritime District, and that's working with our community groups to actually design in innovation strategies through that Hub In, through the Maritime projects, and making sure we're taking, we talk about the diversity and the richness when you bring, a diverse group around that board. So we need to make sure that when we're developing the programs and projects, we're getting that diverse headset around it, because otherwise you miss the whole opportunities and creativity which that diversity gives. So I guess we're doing it now and days in and out through that reskilling program. We're doing it as well through those kind of near-term programs and projects to pilot them, but longer term our investment propositions through the City Deal and all those other initiatives. And it's also very positive about some announcements in the Department of the Economy and their ongoing vision as well, and making sure that we're delivering diversity and inclusion agendas, but actually reskilling to very significant impacts, not just a digital literacy perspective, but actually given kind of real skills to build that entrepreneurial capability, to build those deep technology skills as well. So, there's a lot of very positive, and I know I work very closely with Carol and the IOD also. So a lot of initiatives that they're driving in this and joining up the dots with all our partners.
I mean, we had a good conversation yesterday, and one of the things that I picked up on was Bizarre Voice talking about how they've moved away from academic selection in terms of their staff, which, to be honest, it can only be a good thing for finding talent from outside the academic system. Carol, I'm assuming obviously from your end as well, obviously with Young Enterprise, you see a lot of talent in schools and it's not always academic. How close do you think teachers in the school system is to understanding obviously the entrepreneurial skills that are needed, and how do we address that? How do we get teachers and schools to understand that you've got some talent in those rooms that may be disruptive?
So I think we have to provide the teachers and the education system with a set of measures that go beyond examination results. And I think that's something that we've probably over the last year seen even more strongly. And that goes to businesses as well. As long as businesses consistently advertise and recruit for somebody with degree level or above, we don't talk levels of education, we talk degree quite often. We talk about how do we shortlist using A levels and degrees and GCSEs. So we tell the young people that all of those skills and competencies matter, but actually what we demonstrate and show them for the majority of companies still is that quite traditional recruitment technique. And I know that touches on what you talked about yesterday. So it has to be the whole piece. It has to be that when we as parents go into school, and I'm going in to look at my son's GCSE subjects next week, the questions I ask are not tell me about his team working abilities. I don't ask about tell me about his communication skills. I ask which are the subjects he'll be able to perform best in, where's he going to get the best results, because all of us in society are driven that way. That's how we measure the success of our schools. So I think there's a lot of other valuable programs out there that very much look at conversion after school, and the trainer in me would like to see those presented very much as proactive choices. You have educated yourself to a level and can now convert and move into a certain field, rather than mostly they're seen as sort of a reaction to almost you studied the wrong route and now you need to fix that. And we approach it in a way of you failed and you've done the wrong thing, you now need to fix it. Yep. So we really need to build in that continuous continuous learning and the concept of that. So if you leave school and don't get the results you expected, I would love that you had a love of learning given to you by your teachers in your school that said, you haven't got it yet, but you will have future opportunities to learn, and you continually do that. But you know, the reality is we still, as parents, measure based on those exam results. So I think we have to challenge ourselves and not just place it at the door of the teachers and the schools.
100%. I'm seeing some excellent comments coming in on the chat. Adam Flanagan mentions again a couple of really good points. One of them being, have you seen the success of Union Blair, which is Tony Blair's son's company? They've just raised, or they're valued at 200 million. They're basically creating apprenticeship programs where young people go in, instead of university, directly into business. Reminds me a little bit about a story I read the other day, which is University of Limerick are going to be working with a lot of big multinationals in the south of Ireland. It's a 4-year program of which everybody goes on 5 paid placements during their time into big corporates, and they learn the industry and the language. So changes like that, they can only be positive things. Niall, I'm going to come back to yourself, obviously, in terms of the kind of landscape of the type of businesses and the makeup of them. We had a good conversation yesterday around obviously boards and boardroom management still being predominantly male in big FTSE companies. Are you seeing a different type of demographic within Glandor and the type of companies that are there now compared to maybe 5-10 years ago? Is the software scene a bit more diverse as well?
Yeah, I guess I suppose we have a good blend and mix of companies here at Glandor, from, as I mentioned, the scaling, the Indigenous SME, and the FDI. I guess probably from the international perspective, a good few of our member companies are probably from that tech side, given the focus in the States, obviously from GB, more professional services and back office over the years as well. So generally, I guess, I suppose our larger enterprise is reflecting the FDI strategy. We are seeing more tech companies, I think, in areas such as renewable. Obviously, that's an area of growth, and we've companies that are kind of working in responsible plastic management. We're seeing companies involved in healthcare. I think looking at kind of the UK and the NHS, I think there's a lot of room for better communication between GPs and making your own medical profile more accessible and stuff. So there's a lot of work there in the healthcare sector as well. So we're seeing a broad range of companies reflecting those kind of areas.
Okay, perfect. And Elizabeth, coming back to yourself, what advice would you give to a fellow entrepreneur? I'm not going to put any barriers on who that person might be. What advice would you give to someone who's got an idea right now and needs to take that first step? What one thing would you advise them to do?
Talk to everyone, literally anyone who will have a 15-minute conversation with you. Like, conversations change everything.
Yeah, it's 100% the right attitude. Reach out to anybody that will listen. Maybe not sometimes your friends and family, because they'll probably tell you it's great when they don't really know or not. But obviously, yes, have conversations and join those dots. How did you get onto the Techstars program in the States?
How did we get on? Oh, we went crazy and filmed our video in a quarry pit that we got into, and reached out to everyone who was on the program before us. No, yeah, we reached out. We got a recommendation from the year before's founder. We asked how it was. We spoke to people. I did it like it was a research project and researched every aspect of it, which just means getting really good at stalking people on LinkedIn.
Join my world. So no, happy days. And obviously, Jane, like in terms of obviously boardrooms and diversity, thinking about FDI companies, and obviously I'm going to come back to Krakow as well, obviously on this point, because I think sometimes London is slightly ahead of us here in having these conversations. But I'm hearing that some investment companies will not invest in companies if it's an male only board, for example. how much do you think the pressure will come down on us? Because obviously FDI companies, big US companies will say, you need to have a split of 50-50 male, female. You need to demonstrate diversity. Are we nearly there with that?
I mean, I think there's empirical data to show the benefit of having diversity on a board. And actually, I'm an engineer, and I've always been in the under 10% as a female engineer around the tables, and then in board levels as well, and that same representation, and also in venture capital. So I think there's the stats are there to make that kind of a really compelling proposition. What I guess I'm seeing more now, and maybe back to the venture capital days of private equity, there is, I guess people are looking for that double bottom line piece. So they're looking for investment in terms of giving them an economic return, but they're also need to make sure that it's delivering from a societal and an inclusion dimension. And I think that was going to be the trajectory in any case, because that's the right thing to do. And there is economic and kind of clear KPI reasons to do that. But actually what COVID has shown is actually the level of disparity between those further to reach communities. And actually it's pushed that agenda in my view. So I think there'll be no longer, it will accelerate that dimension, I believe, because it is kind of exacerbated the level of diversion. So I think there will be more programs and developments that are making that built in, both from the US FDI perspective, and they already have been very forward-looking about community groups and tenders in the public sector for those areas. They've always looked for minority groups and preferential aspects for that. I'm also in the UK government's innovation expert group, and they're looking as one of the programs we're analysing is that diversity and inclusion element, and how that can be developed in as part of the UK government's next 10-year strategy for innovation. So it's mainstream in the conversation, where it used to be kind of tier 2, I would say, up to about five years ago. More needs to be done. It's really good actually to see that the private sector has been leading on this, probably to do with kind of their shareholders' perspective, and also even in the investment funds as well. But there is a coalition of kind of impact behind that.
Yeah, okay, cool. And I'm going to have the final word, obviously, and forgive me again for the pronunciation of Kraku. I want to talk, obviously, so forgive me, I want to talk, obviously, about, obviously, the diversity piece and obviously investment into tech businesses. Diversity VC is a good example of a firm, obviously, that are making sure to kind of invest in diverse founders. There's quite a few that seem to be now developing a really good platform to make a difference, but are we doing enough, and what else can we do to help in terms of not just investment but support?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I feel like firstly, the kind of like VC space has become a lot more aware of the problem. There's a lot more research around it, and I think previously it was very kind of the conversation was a lot more further ahead in America, and there wasn't too much data around the issues of the funding gap for Black founders, for instance, or Black female founders. There's been initiatives from organizations like Extend Ventures, who have now published a report earlier this year, in 2020, where they had a lot of the figures around the disparity in funding, and that's really kind of like put the spotlight on a lot of these kind of VCs. And I think one thing we noticed as well from last year and the work we've been doing, there has been a lot more inbound, and a lot of that was triggered by the kind of Black Lives Matter movement, obviously the George Floyd death in America, and that is again something that kind of acts as a trigger point in that regard. So a lot's been being done as far as like conversations being started, connections being made, partnerships being formed with, for instance, Black-led community groups within the startup space. But what I think is one of the gaps is, there's a stage that a lot of kind of Black founders are at, and I think there's somewhat of an intersection between kind of socioeconomic background and race in this regard. But raising your first kind of 20K to 50K to develop an MVP, to test out your idea, etc., is something that is very challenging for that kind of group. And whereas with some more privileged groups, kind of like maybe white middle class background, the family and friends round is somewhere where you can kind of, go to your parents, go to colleagues, etc. Say, can I have, 10K, 20K to put towards this idea? That's something that just isn't as accessible. And unfortunately, the kind of VC space, they don't fund or provide funds for that level. You kind of need to be kind of like seed fund level, and even the definition of pre-seed has really increased from what it previously was. So that's a major gap that I feel like if there's no support for that earlier stage, then there's not going to be any pipeline when it comes to the stage that VCs are at. So they kind of need to be reaching back even earlier to form those connections with founders from more diverse backgrounds.
Yeah.
So yeah, what I guess what it means is just going back earlier and forming those connections earlier, and building that relationship kind of from a genuine place. So it's not just a case of trying to create a pipeline. It's okay, come into the events. It's running events to create more awareness of what you're doing. Is to be more transparent with your investment thesis and not necessarily just going through your direct network. So there's a lot that can be done. Part of it is structural, but part of it is just like kind of starting earlier.
Yeah. And if anyone kind of questions that, the thing I would always come back to people on, and obviously this is just purely on male, female, there's some reports obviously that have been very much kind of confirmed. 89% of VC funding goes to male only teams, 10% to joined up male female co-founding teams, and literally 1% to female founders. Now break that down further into Black founders, and in the US they've done that work. In the UK not so much so far, but even the government scheme that was there to support early stage founders, statistically and obviously from historical reasons, goes against female founders and those of color, because they don't have that initial round to support them. So we do need to do more work. Jane, I can see that you maybe want to jump in there.
Yes, actually, I was involved in that report, that was BBB initial report, where £1 of 1p in every pound goes to a female-led founder. And actually, what I thought was really kind of striking and interesting is that when you kind of go through those stats, and I guess access that initial seed funding is a critical bit, but you're 7 times more likely to get funding if you have a warm referral. In fact, some VC firms don't actually won't see your deal unless you have a warm referral in. And it's actually access to those diverse groups into that network to say, okay, this is who you should talk to. So I guess the power of things like this that you're doing, Alistair, and creating that, and what Young Enterprise does and what the IOD does and what the Repel programs does, is put you into that network. Because, if you're not even aware of the routes not to go down, never mind those ones to go down, you're aware of who can support you in that journey. So it's getting into that ecosystem to understand that. I think that's been a real barrier, and a kind of unblinded barrier. So even if you do all the awareness sessions for your venture capital partners, if you're not actually within that network, it can be just so opaque to a first time founder from a diverse background.
100%. And obviously, like, I sit here with privilege as someone that's able to talk about this but not live through it. And obviously it's a lot harder. For example, obviously if you don't have those open doors, open hour sessions that VC firms are starting to do a lot more than they used to are so valuable, as is actively calling for founders, obviously, who are either ethnically diverse or from a gender type or male, female, etc. It's so important that we call for more people to come forward, because otherwise we won't fill that gap, and that gap is still humongous. Having said that, having the conversation is a starting point, but it can't be the only thing that happens. I was just going to end on that by mentioning, in terms of conversation, it's great that we have those conversations. I was listening into the British banking report that came out, very similar to the Alison Rose one, which was out from obviously the RBS group and NatWest. And they're fantastic reports and white papers that highlight the disparity. But on the one that was happened in Belfast, there was a female founder that on it, Ava Brown. And basically one of the speakers was academic and said we need a white paper to go forward to the government, and the government need to do something, put something in legislation. And I just turned around and I said, we'll be waiting 10 years. Ava, what do you need us to do right now? And I think we all need to have those conversations where we ask the question, not just do the talking, and then do the doing bit. And I think obviously, Jane, the program that you seem to be doing obviously with Belfast seems to be something that will make an impact as well. So guys, thank you ever so much for the conversation today. I think we could have probably talked for a few more hours, and it is literally the tip of the iceberg of what we could discuss. But I think you all come of it from different backgrounds and experiences, and obviously if we join up those thinkings, then we'll be better together. This is the third of the Northern Ireland Science Festival events that we've been running. Interconnected Virtual is obviously powered by Matrix in terms of looking at STEM and the diversity focus within Northern Ireland and what we can do better. Thank you to Bizarre Voice and Glandor for being community sponsors as well. Thank you for listening in and staying with us. This one's only 10 minutes over. Yesterday it was 15 minutes. I can't help myself. So thank you ever so much, panelists, for your time. Hopefully someone's been doing some social, and we'll make sure obviously there's some good quotes out there for you guys as well. So much appreciated. Hopefully we'll be back next year, but if not, you've got my nice background and you can do a picture of me now. So cheers guys, take care, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.